PCS Vice President. PCS is one of the British affiliates organizing central governments. Thank you, Zita.
Thank you. There's going to be a video that's supposed to play in the background, but without sound, so it's just to give some context of what I'm saying in terms of practical solidarity. I think there's a slideshow, then there's a video, which will show you some of the practical things we've been doing as trade unionists and grassroots organisations in the UK in bringing aid and support and solidarity to refugees who are stranded in France trying to get to the UK. So refugees are fleeing persecution, climate change, conflict and poverty. And all of these things are interconnected. One leads to the other. But when it comes to climate displacement, refugees who are fleeing climate change don't have the same recognition or rights under human rights legislation as others seeking asylum. And I think that's really problematic. And as trade unions, we need to work together to address that issue. And it's obviously a very big thing to change human rights legislation, but climate change isn't going away anytime soon. So we need to address this issue, and we need to do something about it to ensure those people are protected. At the root of climate injustice is racism. People that are fleeing are coming from what some of our grassroots migrant rights groups in the UK are calling sacrifice zones. So they're not the worst perpetrators of climate change, the West is, but they're experiencing the worst impacts. Actually, most of the people that are fleeing those combined impacts that I've talked about come from countries where the West has historically stolen from, pillaged, stripped resources, invaded and taken from colonialism and the enslavement of African people. Migrants and refugees now have been dehumanized, they've been demonized, they've been labeled, they've been scapegoated, they're called less than human, or at the best economic migrants, so that they can be scapegoated as the cause of the lack of housing, lack of jobs, lack of resources, when the real reason for this is austerity, it's cuts, it's outsourcing, it's privatisation, it's frozen pay and pay caps in the public sector, which has led to deepening poverty. And the lack of status for those that are fleeing mean that they can't work and they can't settle properly. But those who have got status, when they get status and migrate, actually contribute to the economy and benefit the economy and benefit society. But we hear lots of myths and lies about them draining the resources of countries in Europe. The impact of these cuts on public service delivery means that the support, advice, care and aid for refugees isn't adequate, and in fact there's more money being spent on putting up higher and deeper fences, for example, on the borders, where we saw when we went to Melilla a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, and the borders trying to separate people from getting across the channel from France to the UK, than is spent investing in our public services and investing in housing and jobs and education, the essential things that people need. And so in the background video and the slides, you can see some of these effects in France. In Calais and Dunkirk, I've been coordinating aid convoys and missions to bring solidarity for the past 4 years. We go every 2 to 3 months. So it means that we've monitored the situation for several years now, and we document the inhumane conditions, and we try and use that to campaign, but also to bring that practical support. And currently there is no infrastructure, there's no processing centres, there's no official camps, there's not even unofficial camps anymore. People are just hiding in the woods, they're brutalised by the police, their blankets and essential items are stolen in the night by police, and people like My group, I run an organisation, a grassroots organisation called Black Activists Rising Against Cuts, Barrack UK, and the other charities and voluntary organisations on the ground are also threatened by the police in a way to try and intimidate them. Actually, because we're a black organisation, when we go to France, we've been barred from accessing the country, we've been stopped and searched. We've been asked if we have knives and weapons in our van. For example, when we've got sanitary towels we're taking for women, they're searched, looking for these knives and weapons. We're asked if we're the same people coming back that went, because people assume because we're not white, then we must be refugees that people are trying to smuggle into the UK. So we face our own demonisation and labelling and racial profiling, just trying to support other human beings. And it's voluntary sector charities and grassroots organisations that are often providing a lot of this support on the ground, because as we've heard from many speakers today, you know, our public services are not adequately or properly resourced to provide the support that should be provided by them. So I think in terms of trade unions, we need to really work closely on the ground with those organisations and give them as much solidarity and support, because most of our organisations are hanging on a shoestring budget or don't have funding. For example, we have to fundraise constantly just to be able to fill up a van with aid and take it. And I think we need to ensure that all of our workers who are working in these areas are skilled, are trained, equality-proofed, have equality training, understand cultural and religious needs, and so on and so forth. And we need to challenge racist, xenophobic and hostile policies introduced by our governments. In the UK, we have the hostile environment, so-called hostile environment, which was introduced by Theresa May, our Prime Minister, when she was the Home Secretary, which included things like go-home vans driving around the City of London with a message on it saying, text home so we can help you be deported if you're here illegally. Who introduced the Immigration Act, which is a racist, divisive piece of legislation which seeks to remove essential public services from people who are migrants and refugees, for example, access to emergency health care and the National Health Service. And so our governments aren't just trying to stop people from coming into Europe and into our countries, they're also deporting in the UK and in some other countries en masse entire aeroplanes full of people on secret charter flights in the night, and these are people that are predominantly from the Caribbean, but are also from other Commonwealth and former Commonwealth countries. So essentially they're Asian and black people, they're not white people, they're not deporting Canadians, Australians, or people from New Zealand, for example. And we're talking about, and this is something personal to me because it's my family's roots, people that were invited from the Caribbean 50 years or more ago to work in public services, for example the NHS, the National Health Service, or on public transport, to rebuild the country after World War II. We were told, and our families were told, it's the mother country, that they're part of the British Empire, and so they came to the UK and were understanding that they're British citizens, they're entitled to be in Britain, they have equal rights and status to everybody who's born in the UK, and now after decades of raising their children and grandchildren, going to school in the UK in many cases, working their whole life, paying their taxes, they're told they're here illegally. They've been criminalised, virtually criminalised by their immigration status. Some people who went on holidays, for example, to a funeral or went home, you know, for a big occasion after many years saved up, they've not been let back into the country. Some of them have been exiled from the UK for 10 years. So imagine your whole life is in a European country. You go on a short holiday for 2 weeks. Everything you have, all your family, your entire life is in the UK, and you can't come back to the country for 10 years or more while you're fighting your case. And then there are young black people who in the UK are disproportionately stopped and searched. For example, in some areas of London, young black people are up to 32 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police than their white counterparts. There's a system called Operation Nexus, and those young people are being deported just because they've been stopped and searched repeatedly. They've never been charged, never been found guilty of a crime. So they end up destitute when they get to the Caribbean or another country because they're stigmatized there. So for example, I have people in Jamaica that are contacting me all the time, and I'm having to make contact with charities on the ground in Jamaica and say, this person needs shelter, this person needs food, can you help them? And actually, if you look at the Caribbean and where people are being deported to, they're also facing climate poverty. So in the Caribbean we have hurricanes. So it just creates more displaced people. So at our annual delegate conference in May, PCS passed a motion calling for a public inquiry into this. And I'm pleased that at the TUC Congress that we held in the UK, the Trade Union Congress, a couple of weeks ago, a similar motion was passed there. And at the Labour Party conference just this week, another motion was passed. So we need to campaign to protect people that are already settled in countries that come from migrant families, not just those who are being denied access to countries. And so what Theresa May did in this when this all broke out about the Windrush issue, which is what they're called because of the ship that came to the UK in the 1950s, this group of people from the Caribbean, what she did was to try and blame our members in PCS who work for the Home Office, who are hard-working, low-paid civil servants. Many of them are black and minority ethnic, and they actually face racist harassment and bullying in the workplace. And she tried to shift the blame to civil servants rather than her racist policies. So we have to seek to reverse racist policies and laws as well as, give practical support to migrants coming into Europe. In the Immigration Act in the UK in 2012 really sought to create an apartheid state in the UK. So I think as well as us working for quality public services that are delivered by public sector workers, not privatised for profit, which drives down conditions for workers, drives down wages and leads to weakened and reduced services, we have to have zero tolerance of racism in our trade union movement, and that includes black and migrant workers leading both our campaigns against racism and for race equality. We need proper equality proofing of the services we deliver. We need to challenge the myths and lies. We need to campaign for climate justice. I welcome the statement that we're going to agree at the end of today, and I was grateful to have the opportunity to contribute to the draft, and I welcome the fact that we're creating a Europe-wide network for both migrant rights and against racism, and I think we need to campaign against racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia and fascism. It's not enough just for us to be anti-racist, we must be for race equality as well. And I want to highlight, in Malia we heard that there are children, refugee children, migrant children who have been forced into prostitution on the Canary Islands. So I started a petition. A group of race equality organisations, including my own in the UK, wrote to the Spanish government, and I would like people to sign that petition. It's on change.org and it's entitled Protect Child Refugees from Sexual Exploitation on the Canary Islands. I think it's really important and positive that we have this statement today, but I think we also need to work towards having a network that's about race equality as well, and having a race equality network and a black network, because the racism, as I've highlighted with the Windrush generation, doesn't stop when you migrate into the UK. It's impacting on second generation like myself, third generation like my son, and it continues. And I wanted to highlight the case of Cecile, just to end, Chair, final thing. Cecile Kyenge, MEP, who's an Italian MEP who has faced horrific racism. She's been likened to a monkey and told that she doesn't belong in Italian politics, that she should do politics in her own country, even though she lives in Italy. There's been calls for her to be raped, and because she stated that the actions against her by politicians are racist, She's been sued now with a legal writ for defamation. So race equality organisations in the UK have started a petition to support her. We're going to be bringing her to the UK Parliament, and she's going to be speaking on a platform with myself and others. And I think that we need to stand up to that kind of horrific racism. I understand that there is a letter coming from politicians worldwide to support her, but that's the example that I wanted to give, because we're here in Italy, that we need to stand up to every level of racism. I myself have been stalked online and physically by fascists because I'm an anti-racist campaigner. I've had death threats, and so at every level we need to ensure that our black workers, our black and migrant workers and our trade unionists are supported at every level so that we can campaign against racism and for migrant rights without being threatened ourselves. Thank you.